Every leader has gaps. You have to make a decision if you want to dance with it or not.
Whenever the value of authenticity becomes so commercialized, it's no longer authenticity.
When you hear stuff that can be partially true, let it coach you without killing you. Let that truth cut you enough to help fix you.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford. It's so nice to see you today.
Nice to see you. So you represent Golden State. Did you even know that's what the shirt was?
Yep, I put that together.
Okay.
With the bridge.
Here we go. There's there.
And the golden.
There we go. So you got the city on. Straight. Yeah. Shout out all the city girls.
Yeah. Which is so funny because this is a hand-me-down from your son.
I know, right? Yeah.
He was giving me my clothes and he's getting too big.
He definitely tries to be a city boy.
And I was like, I'm definitely going to cut that and turn that into baby tea. That's what I did.
There you go. Sweet. What's been up?
What's been up?
Yeah.
Wow. What have we been doing? I feel like we've been in this vortex of building out a really big product.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things where you do so much during the day, and then at the end of the day, I'm like, what did I do today? Even though it was all so important.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. What about you?
It's been a lot. Been in New York. I was in New York for a few days. So
you had a incredible experience at Broadway show.
I did. Went to Michael Jackson.
Yeah, and you're not a Broadway show kind of guy.
Definitely not. So
I know that you were walking in there with an attitude.
No, I actually did. I didn't walk in there with an attitude. I actually was
hopeful.
I was hopeful because again, it was Michael Jackson. So I figured, okay, like worst case, there's good. I'm like the music, whatever. Now, the one problem with going to those shows is they literally make the seats
like
they're literally built for like Bilbo Baggins. It's like the leg room. I'm like, you cannot like sit in there. So I literally had an aisle with my feet out. The thing, I was like, yo, this is like literally awful. I was like, if I had because at first we had like middle and whatever. Oh, there's no way. I would have just stood up in the back and watched it because I'm like, there's just no way. I'd have been so uncomfortable to sit like that. But besides that, it was just done like so well. And again, I love going to things that are done really, really well. So that's why I actually like going to Las Vegas. I like going to Las Vegas to actually see like the shows or see things because you get to just see high quality. And the thing about high quality is not just about the money they spend. It's just about how they effectively use everything. And so that part was really good for my creative mind to look at different things. But yeah, it was done like so well. And the performance was great. I mean, it's just amazing how people can the vocal range of individuals to the band and stuff like that. Yeah, it was done really, really well. What
was inspiring to you?
I think what was inspiring for that was, I think, the story was about Michael Jackson getting ready for his Dangerous tour. So it's kind of like they were, so that was kind of the premise behind it, but they would go back, from the time he was a kid, and then they would go to like Thriller album, all those things. But I think the thing that was inspiring most was like his ability, like what he actually wanted. Like he kind of like was saying, no, I want to be separate from what my family when I was doing like this kind of this, this boy pop star when he was the Jackson 5 to like, he kind of saw what he could be. And in a sense, what he should be. He didn't even see it as he could be. He's like, no, I should be this. And just the literal focus of that, you saw he was driven for perfection. And I think that's, you have to be, I think that kind of went unhealthy for him. But I do believe there's something about like, he was incredibly talented. But man, his work ethic was like through the roof. So that was like really, really inspiring for me. Watching somebody who was like, just immensely talented, but also just their work ethic. So that was really cool.
Well, you sold me so much so I'm going in August.
Oh, that's awesome. No, you'll have a lot of fun and again, just how they use everything, like the transitions that they do are seamless. Like you don't even notice, like there's moments where I'm like, where did he go? And they just do that. I mean, just in the way they built the entire story. Yeah, it was really good.
Cool. Well, before we get into today's topic, we have already shouted out the Black Leadership Summit quite a few times.
Yep.
But we are going to do a little pop-up of all of the merch that we still have that we are selling that is now available to the public. So if you're interested, leave a comment, DM us, message us, and we'll make sure we get an item over to you.
Absolutely. A lot of great gear from there, a lot of great merch. So make sure you cop something, wear it. Listen, it's called
support Black leaders.
Yeah, support Black leaders.
Buy the merch and support Black leaders.
And you don't have to be Black to wear it either. It's going to be a lot of white people walking around with Black leadership merch. All right. So just check it out.
Okay, so today I actually kind of suggested today's topic and was like, what do you think about talking about this? And also, we should talk about this. Because I had a friend who's been a part of a lot of what we've done for a little bit, who is in the film industry, who was kind of dealing with something and asked if we would talk about it on the podcast. So we're going to talk about gossip.
Talking about gossip. All right. This is going to be interesting. Gossip, authentic leaders. I'm coming into this incredibly blind for everybody. All right. This was not like I don't have anything like pre-planned, prepared, whatever. So this is you're about to get raw uncut. So hopefully I don't get fired today, but we'll see. Okay.
So part of the reason why, I'll say why I think that this is important is because no matter who you are, it's something that you navigate within your life at no matter what place of leadership. And it's also incredibly complex. Like, why is gossip bad? Like, when is something considered gossip? Or I guess why is not why is gossip bad, but why can it be harmful?
Yep.
And then also, what does it look like to navigate it when it's within maybe your friendships? What does it look like to navigate it when you're in a position of power?
Yep.
What does it look like to navigate it when somebody's maybe speaking bad on you? How does it impact you if you're someone who is a part of gossip? I feel like it applies to so many different places that we find ourselves.
Absolutely, it does. Let's dive into it. What we got?
Yeah. So, okay, to start us off, is gossip harmful? Because we live in an era where it's like gossip is exciting.
Yep.
So is it harmful?
I think gossip is harmful because I think that the first thing, especially in today, so let's look at like words are powerful. I think that's the first thing we have to realize. I think sometimes, people will feel like, or maybe say they don't think, actions speak louder than words. And you're like, yeah, but also words speak really loud too. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, when somebody says something about you, or maybe they're gossiping, you're saying stuff that may not be true, that really impacts. Because I believe words, I would say it this way, words build worlds or they tear them down. And so words are very powerful. The other thing about gossip today that I believe is the issue is I believe that people have become so consumed with everybody else but their own lives. And so you would try to become, so with gossip, many times you're trying to be an expert of other people. Because when you think about when gossip is being shared or whatever, a lot of times people don't know the information. They know partial truth. They may have heard something third hand from somebody else. And what they end up doing is try to be an expert of somebody else. And they spend more time focusing on other people versus actually focusing on their world, themselves, whatever. And so I think that's what's happening a lot today. People spend way too much time worrying about other people.
So in the context of what we do, we would often say that being an expert of somebody else is a product of anxiety or a product of codependence.
Yep.
So would you say that gossip is a product of an anxious culture?
I would say, yes. I would say it's a product of an anxious culture. I also say it's a product of, I think, a very envious culture. I think because we're connected now, like never before, we have access to people. We have access to people's lives, and there's good things. I remember growing up, you didn't have access to, to a movie star's life or influencer's life or whatever. Like, you didn't have access to, like, I didn't know what was going on, back in the day with, like, when Will Smith became big. I wouldn't they know what's going on with him. It was like he's the movie star. He's on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air now. He's on Instagram and he's on TikTok and he's on all those things. And you get to see behind the scenes a lot of like what's going on. I think because of that, what can happen, and then just in other people's lives, people then begin to look at other people and begin to tear them down, because what I think happens, they begin to have envy over what they have. They end up spending a lot of time, oh, this person does this. Then they start to question their motives or intention behind that. They begin to say, oh, they're not really genuine and authentic. Oh, they do this just to get likes or to get followers. They do this. And then they just spend time worrying about everyone else versus actually worrying about self. So I think that envy is underneath that as well with anxiety.
Do you think that it happens more frequently now as opposed to culturally in the past, or do you think it's just louder?
I think it's louder. I think human nature is human nature. I think that those who are older want to always make it like, oh, the world was just better when we were this. I'm like, no, we just have more access. People, your gossip only went to like your neighborhood, right? Your gossip went to the friends you had, like relationship, or at your workplace, kind of those around you. Right now, you could literally, me and you right now, we could go live on a social media platform. I've got close to 7,000 followers. I could literally go live and just say, hey, you know, Bree is what, I just like start talking about whatever. And it's like, I just think there's just instant access to it more. But I think it's always been in the human heart. Humans have always been this way. I just think now it's just escalated a lot more.
Okay, so I'll speak for myself personally.
Mm-hmm.
There are times where, let's say I'm talking with somebody else and we bond over a common belief over another person.
Okay.
At what point does that become gossip?
Is a common belief is it like a negative thing, or is it like, give me like what's an example?
I'm just asking in general. Like I know that I would say that gossip is almost like chic, and it's used as a form of bonding.
Yeah.
So like, did you see that person? Did you see what they did? What do you think about that? And I think there are times where there's a very thin line between going into something that might not be true, even if you're starting off with saying like, oh yeah, like I saw this, and when I saw this, it made me feel kind of, you know, whatever. Maybe it's about a public figure. Maybe it's about a politician. Maybe it's about like your boss. And at first it's starting somewhere that maybe has some truth with it, something that might be hitting you the wrong way, or something that's hitting you good, which is another question. Like, is it gossip if it's something good, or is it only gossip if it's something?
Yeah, I think and again, I don't know technically the definition of like actual gossip, but how I define gossip is when people are communicating things in a negative manner with, I think many times to like tear down or to hurt the character of somebody else. I think that's when gossip happens. So like, for example, if you're connected to someone like, oh, like, I don't know, you're connecting about some, you know, somebody in fashion or whatever. And then you start talking about, oh man, I heard that they were a part of like, you know, they were a part of like Louis Vuitton's thing. Now they moved over to, you know, to Gucci or whatever. I don't think that's gossip. I think that's just information that I kind of heard this. I don't know if it's true or not, but then you guys talk there. I think it becomes gossip when it's like, it then becomes a negative thing where you're now attacking or saying things about someone in a negative manner that you may not have full truth on. You know what I mean? Like, so there's things that's information. There's like true information, right? So for example, we can talk about, recently, President Trump, right? He was convicted on a certain amount of like felony charges with this case. Okay. That me telling you that it's not gossip. That's just, that's just a true fact. Now, me then getting into all the stuff of like, well, was it a trumped up by the Democrats? Oh, Democrats just do it this way. They were all just trying to find a reason to do this on him, to hurt him during the election. Okay, that starts to go into gossip because like, do I really know that? I mean, that's an assumption, but like, do I really know those things? So I think when you start trying to tear someone's character, start trying to misalign them, try to make it more on a like and not in a positive light, I think that's when gossip starts to happen.
Usually gossip is, even when you think of the term, it's almost characterized as like young female. Like when you hear the term gossip, you think of like 11, 12-year-old girls. Like that's usually the context. And so usually when we work in corporate spaces, there's almost this idea of like, that doesn't happen here. Like we don't do that. Yeah. But some of the places where I've seen it most prevalent is like honestly with like older men. I was going to say, yes, wait, 100%. What are you guys doing?
Oh, listen, that's why when I listen to older men talk about like stuff about the next generation, they're soft and they do stuff. I'm like, dude, you guys gossip literally like at the same rate as my 13-year-old daughter. Like, it's just, you talk about somebody, you talk about them in a negative light. They're not there. Here's the other thing too. You won't say that if the person was in the room. You know, that's the whole thing for me. And men are the worst. They're like way worse than, like, or I should say this, men and women, I think it looks different, but it's at the same rate of like gossip and whatever. I just think that it was so portrayed that women did this. You know, it was kind of however that started. It was like, women are the ones, or young girls are the ones who gossip. I think everybody does. I think men and women both do it at a very high rate.
So can you share a little bit about how you've seen it look within corporate America, male or female, just so that it's we're giving some examples within.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've seen it to where people can have, you know, among the workforce, they can have a perspective of their boss. So maybe their boss, you know, he didn't mention a certain thing. Like he didn't talk about, maybe in this how this is okay. Maybe a boss during their like quarterly kind of report or quarterly kind of not earnings but report, they didn't mention anything about like the new like hires or maybe how they're focusing on diversity, right? So gossip will be where I've seen people begin to then question someone and saying like, oh, they don't really care about like diversity because if they did, then why didn't they mention it here? Well, like, you don't know everything that went into that agenda. You don't know how long, we've been in those meetings where like, okay, there's 8 million things people are trying to say in 1 hour. They have to cut things down. What's the most important? They may have talked about it the quarter before that, whatever it may be. But just because they don't mention it doesn't mean, so that ends up being like a way that the employee base gossips, or the way I see like in C-suite gossip is that they'll begin to question people's work ethic. Like, so if people, when people were talking about coming back to work and people didn't want to come back, there was a whole debate about that. Oh, well, it's because the workforce isn't working hard and they're lazy or they're this and this person's that way, or how the older or like those in the C-suite will talk about like, Gen Z and millennials or, or really like Gen Z about like what they do and how they work without ever having a conversation with that person, knowing what's actually happening. So I've seen like a lot of like perspectives and things be said about someone without anyone ever going into asking that person directly. So I think it happens a lot because I think what people do is they love triangles. Like our default button is to create triangle relationships. It is the idea of I'm talking to you, Bree, and then all of a sudden I pull Lauren in. And so I've got an issue with you, or I'm questioning something, then I bring Lauren in and I begin to say, hey, Lauren, what, in the name of I'm just trying to get some advice, what do you think about Bree? You know what I'm saying? I mean, Bree said this. Do you think Bree is racist? Blah, blah, blah. Even though she's not. Do you think Bree is racist? Do you think Bree is this? Because when I walked in today, she didn't say anything. And like, and I've kind of heard some things, blah, 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 blah. And like now all of a sudden, Lauren has not thought anything about it. But now all of a sudden, Lauren, oh, well, I don't know. Maybe she is racist. I did, she didn't post anything, on your birthday. So, maybe she doesn't like black people. Like, no, like, but it goes to those quiet places. And then like, because human beings are built, unfortunately, our default button is to create triangle relationships. And when triangles happen, it's always gossip instead of going directly to the person.
And what is the long-term impact of that within an organization?
Oh, I think it tears your culture apart. Because what you end up doing, you end up having a false, fake culture. I believe that one of the key things to building a healthy culture is this idea of being able to have real radical candor, being able to have real conversation. And I think when gossip is going on, what that does is that is one, it tears down people. It tears down the credibility of someone who may have never thought negative about someone else now is questioning something about someone's, maybe their character, their work ethic, the practices of what they do, intense motives. So that tears down a person, which again, that's when people make up culture, people make up companies. So when you're tearing somebody down, that ends up, harming the culture. I think the other part of it that really begins to tear, there's not the ability to go have a real conversation, because if you're gossiping, then when there needs to be really important things to talk about, you don't have the ability to actually go and sit and look somebody in the eyes and say tough things. And so that ends up being the culture. And then you end up you build silos that way, to where there's this group, this faction versus this faction. You start to have where then like there's just no, like when it starts coming to like unity among the team where you got to get a project done, people don't work well together because now all of a sudden they've got all these things that are going on that they've heard, or they've heard somebody may have said about them. And so now they're like, screw that. I'm not going to that person. I don't want to deal with them, whatever. Or the idea that like, oh, I've heard that this person was saying this about me, so I don't want to help them now. Mm-hmm. And so then they don't go the extra mile. Because, I mean, that's, if you feel like if somebody said some stuff about you and they're spreading some rumors or things that may not be true or partial truth, your natural inclination is not going to be like, you know what, man, I really want to help that person. Mm-hmm. So it messes up team dynamics. It's not the whole of we're willing to sacrifice for one another because now somebody has made those kind of statements or whatever. So it absolutely is an absolute killer of culture.
Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times when we have these conversations, people have the assumption that things like this don't impact the bottom line. They don't impact work ethic.
Yeah.
But it does seem like when you're taking something that is either untrue or unknown and believing it as if it's 100% true, you're living in a level of relational deception.
Yep.
And how does relational deception impact the work that's produced within a team?
I think it ends up being to where like I was saying, you won't go the extra mile for someone or for the organization, because if now you think that this person, you know, I mean, you think about it like, if all of a sudden, Bree, you said something to Lauren about, hey, I think Adrian thinks this about you, right? And say it was like it may not even be a crazy negative thing, but it could be something. Well, here's what's going to happen. Now, if I'm Lauren in that situation, the natural thing, if she felt like I said something negative or I have whatever, there's not going to be this like eagerness, you know, will she probably do her job? Yeah. But will she go the extra mile if she thinks I have this thought about her or, you know, I question things about her? Like, no. Or the other part, if she thinks, you know, if I'm like, you know, being more of a, like kind of a quote unquote superior role, then all of a sudden there's nerves that are there. So it's now such, oh, they may think this. So then like, I don't get her best work because she may think that I think something about her. So she's just not trying to mess up. It just literally, there's just no way you get the best work, which in turn messes up your bottom line, because people produce the stuff that you're making. People are the ones selling the stuff. They're the ones creating the stuff. And so if they're not giving their full, and their heart's not fully into it, it's going to eventually affect their work ethic. What they'll do is they'll give you enough. They'll get enough just to get by, but they won't go the extra mile for you.
So we talked a little bit about the person doing the talking and that coming from a place of envy. And then there's also another person in the equation, which is the person being talked about. So can we talk a little bit about the internal structures of that person? Would you consider yourself to be somebody who often thinks about what other people might be saying about you?
For sure. Absolutely. Because I've mentioned it before, because I think the broken parts of me is I really do care what people think about me. And so if I care what people think about me, then, you know, and I want to have a good impression, I'm always thinking about that. I'm always thinking about like, okay, well, man, like, okay, if I said this, and whether they're going to think this, if I really say this part, what are they going to think? I mean, also, again, and this is just reality, being a 6'6" Black man. Yeah. Like I think about what people think about me when I walk into a room. My natural stature is just that of like, I'm a big guy. So that's one thing. And then just being honest, the reality of our culture a lot of times is that there's going to be natural, like, just kind of like this like little hesitancy when you see someone because of things that have been put into the culture. And again, that's not me blaming all this stuff, but that's reality. So for me, I'm always walking to a room thinking about, man, what are people saying about me? What are they saying? Did I say this? Did I say this the right way? Did I say that too aggressive? Did I communicate this well? All those things are constantly there. So to answer this a long answer to your question of like, no, absolutely. I think about that.
Okay, so how does that impact the narrative when people may be gossiping about you? One, is there ever like internal work that you have to do to kind of sift through what might be a narrative that I'm pulling for further than what it is? And then even the complexities of like, what if what they're saying is even a little bit true, even if they shouldn't be talking about it the way that they're talking about it, even if they're not delivering it with the right intent, but what if it's a little bit true? How do you not, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater? Yeah,
I think the first thing is I have to do a lot of internal stuff, because when you feel like someone may be saying stuff about you, a lot of times I think we could be reading it from the wrong lens of our past. So recently I had a good friend of mine talk to me about this, because we were just, it's like I was with my friends. We were on our trip that we do, and our last night we kind of have a time where we really sit there and we really just talk about where we're at. And one of the things is that I was talking just kind of about like, man, I'm just, you know, I was dealing with some stuff and working through, man. And even with them, I think I was like, hey, I feel like you guys' perspective is this, and this, and other people's perspective is this. And one of my friends, in a very good way, he's like, is this something that, you know, that you really have heard? Or is it something that you're kind of like assuming that's there because of real life, real events, things that's happened? And when he said that, I was like, I sat there for a minute. I'm like, oh no, like, I think probably a good portion of this are things that I just assume, because here's the problem. With having intuition, that's what I really do well. I can actually read into stuff and get ahead of it. Well, the negative part of intuition is that when my intuition is being led by brokenness, when it's being led by past events, not the actual moment that's actually happening. And so I think absolutely you have to do the internal work to see, okay, is this really happening? First of all, Like, is this really being said? The second thing I have to do is I have to go internally say, okay, why does this bother me? Because regardless, say it's like partial truth or not true at all. But you've had stuff said to you that's not true and it like hurts you. The question I say, okay, why does it bother me? If I know it's not true, if I know I'm secure in who I am, why does this bother me? And a lot of times when you get down there, it's because we many times care more about what people think about us than we actually think about ourselves. We care way more for what other people think about us than we actually care like for what we actually think about ourselves. So we would rather have this great view. Everybody has this great view of us, and we don't really, we say, oh, I have a great, healthy view of myself. Like, no, you care more about this. And so when I get to the basement, I start realizing, oh, I'm way more concerned about this because of how I'm viewed, how I'm perceived, what people are going to think. And a lot of times that's just a bad way to live, because at the end, like if that's what you live for, like, you know what I'm saying? Like when, I think it's the whole thing, if you live for their acceptance, you'll die from their rejection. And it's like, and it's a true statement. And so I think that that's what I try to get to the basement of, is kind of getting to that part to actually say like, man, what's going on in me? Because a lot of times, I have to do that. The second thing I would say is like, it's what the famous evangelist Billy Graham used to say. He said this, he was like, let your critics be your greatest coaches. One thing that I think you have to do is when you hear stuff that can be partially true, let it coach you without killing you. Like, let it coach you without killing you. Because, I talk a lot about this. Critique, correction, you're going to have three responses: the alligator, the samurai, or the patient. The alligator is someone who's a tough skin. Someone critiques. You don't take that information. You fight against it. So that's like when somebody says, hey, like they try to give you a little correction and you're just defending, correcting. You never like even try to take it in. The samurai is the person who just falls on their sword. They self-loathe. You're right. I'm the worst. I'm a terrible person. You know what? I knew I'm always a failure. And they go there and it's like, so you let the critique kill you. The other one's a patient. Actually, when people may say something, they may be gossiping, there may be some truth there. Let that truth cut you enough to help fix you. Because a patient lays on an operating table willfully, and when a surgeon cuts them, it's not cutting them to kill them, it's cutting them to actually help them be better. So I think that you have to like let those critiques actually help coach you to actually be better but not kill you.
I feel like off of that same analogy, you also it seems like you don't want to have too many surgeons in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there also like a credibility on relational equity, how much you know me, how much you understand where we're trying to go, that changes the level of weight that I'm willing to give you on piercing me?
Yeah, absolutely. But here's what I would say. I think that like not every critique or gossip about you need to deal with, especially if you already know it and you're working on it. So let's just say someone says, oh, okay, here's a great example. Like for me, a critique could be that like, or here's a great example. Like in the church I lead, it's the critique could be, well, you're a pastor, and people have all these assumptions of what pastors should be, right? You should be at a hospital visit. You should be here. You should be here. You should be here. Well, I know that for me, I know the skill set, the gifts, the whatever I'm doing. And I know that we have a group of elders who help lead, and we really empower our people to really lead. And so, but I also know too, I can be outward focused a lot. And so I know that's a thing that I'm constantly working on, and building systems underneath to make sure people are cared for. Because that's the whole point. The whole point is to make sure people are cared for well. Well, when somebody critiques me, and let's say our system isn't where it was at, where it's at now, when somebody would critique me of this, I have to be willing to be like, oh, I already know I'm working on that, and I got to let that go. All right, cool. You said that. Fine. You think I don't care about people. Keep it moving. Because I know that we're working on that to fix the actual problem. Because I know that's not what that really is going on. It's just a different way. And so I know it's a little bit of an abstract one, but I think sometimes if you got somebody critiquing you, you have to ask yourself, are you actually working on it? And if you are, then keep it moving. But also, yeah, you can't be thinking about every single person, because this is a fine balance. Because like, man, what can end up happening, sometimes I've gotten critiqued or people gossiping about stuff who I don't even know, but it actually really helped me because there was some stuff that was there. So I think you just have to take every situation for what it's worth. You have to look at every situation, I think.
So I think this is something that most, especially CEOs or founders, deal with. And it's that whenever you have the vision for something and when you've created something, it is, in this weird way, it's also you.
Yep.
So
100%.
like the rejection to the mission feels like a rejection to you.
Yep.
Because in some ways it is.
Yep.
But there's also like a mental tension there of like, this person isn't rejecting me, but also they are rejecting so many things about this thing that is me. So I even find myself a lot of times like, I don't know if there's even like a clear way to think about that. So how do you navigate that? Because it's something we see every one of the leaders that we work with deal with.
Yeah, but going to the person who actually asked us this question, this person does film. So like, if all of a sudden people are gossiping about them in the film that they're doing, or say something negative about whatever, man, that's their creation.
Right.
That's something they work hard for. That's a skill set. Now all of a sudden, that would feel some type of way. That's like somebody critique. Honestly, when you create something, it's like somebody critiquing or saying something gossip about your child. Like, it feels that way. But here's my big thing. It's just part of it. The one thing that I think people today, and what I had to come to this realization, you asked me how I deal with it, it's expectations and reality. See, if your expectations are you're not going to be critiqued by people, tell me in the history of the world where people didn't have an opinion about people they don't know or about something. It's always happened. But we act like it's like freaking like new, like, oh my God, this has never happened. It's always happened. Listen, Jesus was perfect. And they criticized and gossiped and critiqued about him. What in the world you think they're going to do about me? So what I've had to do is realize it comes with it. And if you don't like it, don't lead, don't create things. I don't think you get that. You don't get the free pass. If you want to lead, lead. And you know what comes with that? Rejection. You know what comes with that? Gossip. You know what comes with that? People misunderstanding you. And you know what's crazy about that? Sometimes people will misunderstand you and you will never have the ability to actually correct or defend them. They will literally walk away with that perception, with that thing about you. And that's a part of leadership. And so I think so many times people do not come in with the right expectation. So if you don't like it, don't lead. Let's be realistic. It's never happened in human history. Anybody who's led, anybody who's created has been talked about. People have misaligned their character. They've done that. So what makes you feel like you're special that they're not going to do that to you? And I think that's when people get turned upside down because they don't expect it. So now I expect this. I expect people are going to have opinions about me because I am someone who's not a typical pastor. Right? I run multiple things. Okay, great. People are going to have thoughts about me because you know what? I talk about justice. So they're going to think, oh my God, he's some militant, he's a part of, Black Lives Matter. And in the church world, they'll even say, oh, he don't have good theology or whatever. People are going to gossip about me because they'll say, oh, how's he helping organizations become authentic and develop that? He doesn't have a degree or a master's or a PhD, in organizational, like whatever, leadership or whatever. And it's like the people are going to have their thoughts, but at the end of the day, if I expect it, doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but I have to expect that's what's going to come with it. Mm-hmm. If not, I just need to get out and just don't do stuff where people are going to critique me. Just play the background. But that's
Which
not.
isn't really realistic anyways.
No, I mean, listen, that's the thing. Even if you play the background, you think somebody's not going to critique you? Okay, let's say you're like, I've got a friend of mine right now whose son's really good in basketball. He's a great dude. Military, vet, 2 tours. So, just a great dude. Son's really good at basketball. Man, people critique him because of his son. And it's like, dude, he's just there. He's a present father raising his son. Matter of fact, he's a father raising his son by himself. And him doing that, and people critique him all the time. And it's like, it's a dude who's just the military vet, does all the right stuff, raising his kid, and people critique him. So every time I see him, I'm like, they critique him of his kid, not even what he does. I just think they're going to do it. And so you just got to kind of expect it and kind of, you got to deal with it and make sure. And that's the other thing, which we can maybe get into. You got to make sure when people talk about you, you can't let your heart turn black. You can't turn it.
Before you get into that, okay,
all right, we won't go there. Right.
So, because it was something you've already mentioned. Yep. So, in terms of expecting for there to not be criticism, I feel like at some times there are moments where maybe you experienced a leader, and like, let's just use a specific example. Yep. So maybe that person was super creative and innovative, which comes sometimes being a little bit more all over the place. Yep. And so your idea is I will never be that. Because I'm critiquing them, and in return, I'm saying I will never be that. I will always be the stable one who brings stability and comfortability and predictability because I experience maybe the negative parts of this other form of leadership or personality. And then the same people who were saying before about that person that they weren't stable enough, and now there's somebody else leading and they're more stable, are now saying to you, you're not innovative enough. No, the thing that you basically did because you were like, I won't get criticism if I perform this way. Then the same people just start doing the same thing to you.
Because what that is what we talk about, that you're not being authentic when that starts to happen. You're inauthentic because what you were doing is like, okay, I'm going to be stable. All right, I'm going to be stable. Even though that may be your skills, I'm going to be stable. And I'm only going to be stable because this person I worked for, it was hell for me to work for them because they were innovative entrepreneur. They're all over the place, right? Well, here's what happens. When you just start then behaving, maybe it's your skill set, maybe it's not, but when you just start behaving for, again, the approval of people or to insulate yourself from gossip and slander, it's just no way around it. Because what I've come to realize, almost everything when I do that, when I try to do something, because I know they're going to say this or whatever, and I am literally doing it, I honestly get critiqued or criticized for the exact thing that I'm trying not to do. And so that's why I tell people it doesn't work. That's why it's so important to have to be aware of who you are and lead out of that and realize it's not the cup of tea for everybody. That's the problem. The problem why things get sideways and it hurts us is because we feel like we're supposed to be the cup of tea for every person. They're not. Every leader has its gaps. One of my mentors said this. He said to me years ago, he's like, Adrian, every leader has gaps. You have to make a decision if you want to dance with it or not. Every leader does. I have them. You have them. Everyone has them. And so if you think you're perfect, you're not. And you're going to have leadership gaps that other people don't want to rock with. They don't want to follow that. Some people do not want to follow me because of, listen, I'm going to open up doors. We're going to move fast. We're going to push hard. We're going to do that. And that may not be for them. And what they will say is that, you're a workaholic, your culture, you live in a hustle culture. It's all the stuff. And that's their opinion. And you know what? I can listen. I make sure I evaluate. Are we doing this? Are we doing the right things? But at the end of the day, I just wasn't for them. And a lot of times that was funny about that pisses people off more. That makes them gossip more. Because when you don't react to them, it's why that, again, I know I've mentioned some stuff about God, the Bible, whatever, but it's like Proverbs. It's like, well, when somebody says a negative thing to you, it's like, I'm paraphrasing, and it's like you don't respond. It's like putting a heap of burning coals. It's like it kills people when you don't respond. There's been people who are clients who leave. And I'm like, oh man, hey, whatever. What can we do to help you? Or, people come to, leading a church, people come and go. I had somebody the other day. I'm like, man, I said this and it took them they were surprised. I'm like, oh, we may not be the cup of tea for you, but if we aren't, man, how do we help you? I know a lot of great churches in the city. How do we help you get connected? And that throws people off because I'm like, you go wherever you want to go. And so I just tell people, when you start leading, here's the thing. When you start leading out of a real authentic place, here's the interesting part. People will start to talk about you even more when you're genuinely living out of that. Because a lot of times, secure people makes other people very insecure. That's the other thing. If people are talking about you, I'm almost like, what is going on in you? When I look at people in comment sections, respond, I'm like, dude, the level of how soft you are to comment on someone's thing, especially when I see them just the hatred that it'll be towards someone. I'm like, you wouldn't do that in someone's face. You do. It's just, and I'm like, Matt, what makes this person be so secure in himself that you're that insecure? I see it all the time, especially among men, where they talk about other men. I'm like, you don't have anything else to do with your life? I'm like, I'm pretty freaking busy with my life. Like, the last thing I'm trying to do, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this, but the last thing I want to do is spend time talking about somebody else. I got a lot to do with my life. And so the more secure you are, the more it makes people insecure.
So, which I think this ties into the idea of not allowing your heart to go dark. When do you know how to respond to something and when not to respond to something, I guess, in terms of like correcting the narrative?
Yep.
And can you maybe speak to the difference when it's internal, like maybe even within a team that you're leading, and when it's something that might be more external about what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's this. I think if it's internal, like let's say it's among your team, and you recognize some of the critique that's going on about you, and I'll give you a very practical example. I've mentioned very openly on this podcast about some of my, some of my mental health and emotional struggles. One of the things early on in my leadership, I was very, very up and down. Like, I mean, at times I'm still like, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, right? But I was really, really up and down. Like, and when I would get up or when I would get down, like it was like a huge, huge effect. And so at some point in time, like it was started to impact in a negative manner. I had to address that and saying I had to own that. Yeah, you guys are right. And this is what I'm working on. Now, am I ever going to be like this straight across stable person? No, that's not who I am. But I need to be better to where when those things happen, what are my practices to make sure I'm not projecting as, so much within the organization, whatever. And so I had to own that. I had to communicate that. I think the other thing about speaking publicly about stuff or whatever, I think one of the things is that people are so afraid today to be canceled. That's why everybody starts to talk. Well, I don't want people to think this. Why? Because you don't want them having that. Because why? What if they cancel me? And here's the thing. When you are so tied to stuff financially, you're so tied to image, whatever, then you're going to always try to protect that. Because I tell people, what makes Dave Chappelle, like I think he's a great example of this, what makes him so powerful is he literally wants you to cancel him. Because like that, his hope and goal is for you to cancel him so he can just go back to his farm in Ohio and invite people there and still tell jokes. But he just will say the wildest stuff. And then you can't cancel somebody who doesn't care because he doesn't do it for the money. He does it for the art form and whatever. So that's what's made him even more. He's made even more money the more stuff he says. This is what he thinks, feels. And again, I don't agree with everything Dave Chappelle says, but what I do appreciate about him, he is who he is, and he doesn't care what you think if this is what he believes, and he's not going to let public opinion sway him. I think so many times today we are so concerned with public opinion and people canceling and what they're going to think about me. Am I going to lose this and this? That we just don't have a lot of like real, authentic people leading because they're just doing it for just to keep their position, their likes, their power, whatever. And honestly, I just don't think that's healthy for a culture. I don't think that's healthy for people. And I think that's why we're in this incredible leadership crisis right now. It's because everyone is in image management. Everybody today is image management. You look at my social media, how am I curating this? And even people who are on social, and you always keep me hip to this stuff. Even people on social right now who are like, they're not trying to manage it. We don't want they don't want their Instagram or their TikTok, whatever, to look curated. We want it to look like, just not. Dude, that's literally a brand that you're doing. It's still image management. You just want to look like a dirt bag. Like, I'm sorry. You want to look like you want to look like a dirt ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, I'm not keeping myself. I'm not putting makeup on. I'm like, all right, great. That's your image now. You know what I'm saying? Because it's the hot, popular thing. If in order to be a leader, you have got to understand this is just part of it. And that, like, if you're so caught into your image management, at some point in time, you will stop being an effective leader.
Yeah, there's almost this, and you're talking about the social media example, whenever the value of authenticity becomes so commercialized, it's no longer authenticity because it's still curated content to be perceived as authentic.
Yeah, that's it. And it's like, oh, well, I went on live today without like a camera, without like a professional camera. I just flipped my camera around while I'm sitting in my room. And now all of a sudden I see these videos all the time. That's now, and because here's what happens. As soon as that's the worst thing that happens. As soon as you start getting likes on something, man, you start like I mean, just that's all you do. You just keep, okay, let me just now do this. Now I got, how do I do this? Okay, I said this. Repeat the formula. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some podcasts that I listen to that me and you listen to. We won't mention it, but like, I mean, they do some really, really good stuff. But what they end up doing is then they go and they look and see, oh, this is like, man, this is getting a lot of buzz. So now the podcast turns into this like whole thing that no longer, I really like, they lose people, which again, that's not a problem, but right. They end up just doing that because, oh, this is what's getting all the likes. This is what's moving it forward.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, air it out. I'm so tired of looking at clickbait. And then listening to a podcast.
Yes.
And it literally talks about that topic for maybe 20 seconds.
Yes. And it's like,
I'm like, can we do clickbait that's close enough to what you're talking about? To where we actually hear that topic?
Or just be honest. Like, we talk about it here. Like, at the end of the day, we're going to talk about authenticity. We're going to talk about leadership because that's what we feel like we're supposed to do. So in that, like, that may turn some people off. I don't want to listen about leadership. I don't want to listen about authenticity. I want to, you know, you guys should talk more about that within the fitness realm or whatever. Okay, well, like, do you know how many freaking fitness podcasts those are? Like, go, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's plenty of stuff to go find. And so, yeah, I just think it's kind of getting more and more like lost because I think we're just kind of out there image managing so much.
So within the team, we talked a little bit about if within the team maybe there's gossip about the leader themselves and how you suggest responding. Yep. Still within the team.
Yep.
How do you as a leader address it if you noticed amongst
people,
team members?
Oh, 100. Well, I believe as a leader.
Because you don't mess around with this.
Yeah, I believe as a leader. I believe a lot of leaders are just freaking cowards. I do. Like, at the depths of my soul, and I don't care what people think. I think they're just cowards. Because they talk this big game about we got this culture and people need to talk straight up with each other, but they see the crap going on and they don't address it. So because why? Because if you address it, what are people going to think about you? So your culture does that because you're a coward and you won't say anything. And I see it with leaders all the time to where like they talk this big, strong game, but they're really just very insecure humans. And again, and I said all that to say like your job as a leader, if you see that going on, is to deal with it. It's to put people in the middle of the ring and like, okay, you got to deal with this. I mean, we do it here. If I know this is going on, I'm literally going to that person. If I see it, hey, you need to go talk to them about that. If not, if I give them a chance, if they don't, hey, we have our thing, call ups and call outs. Oh, hey, I know what's your issue you got. And if they don't say it, I'm going to say it because because I'm telling you, it's like it's a organizational cancer. It kills everything. It kills trust. It kills like innovation, collaboration. It kills work ethic. It is one of the worst things in an organization that will destroy an organization is gossip. Because then it just becomes, and it goes from one thing to the next thing. It ends up being about, oh, what's his name? You know, like, I feel like they're, you know, why are they off? Why are they off today? I feel like they take a lot of days off. The next thing you know, they'll start questioning. It goes from there to, oh, I feel like such and such makes, how much money they make? And then people just throw a random number out there like, oh, I can't believe they make that. We work as hard as they do. It just ends up being this thing. So now people are spending way more time. And I see this a lot. It amazes me how much time is spent, and we do this in certain organizations that just worry about crap that has nothing to do with them. Mm-hmm. Like we have a client that we just kind of like, we work with, and I'm kind of offboarding them, but like they're a group that literally is like, they spend so much time. I felt like I was in high school, the level of gossip. And this is like a company that's doing some really cool stuff, but sometimes they weren't getting traction because they had way too much sideways energy talking about other people's stuff. And so when we went in, we spent a lot of time with them about, man, what we always say is flatten the triangle. Nope, don't have a triangle, have the individual conversation. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost always conflict resolution.
That's it. Yes, 100%.
Every time. And it's because most of the time, leaders neglect their responsibility and paying attention when they themselves or when the team are in conflict and holding people accountable to addressing it because most people don't know how to do that within their own lives. And so you become, you know, the CEO, the founder of an organization, and then you have 100, 200, 300, 1,000 children in your midst, and you yourself also don't know how to navigate it. Yeah. And it just ends up being a ball of chaos.
Because I can tell you, like, I've seen it with people. Like, I can watch people, if you let me go with them and like watch them interact, if they're married or if they have children or whatever, and you let me watch them interact and what they do, I'll tell you how they're going to be as a leader. Like, because sometimes what leaders will do, their anxiety drives them or their fear drives them to then I'm going to confront where we're not having financial bottom line gains. But some of the other stuff that's
control that.
I can control that. So I'm gonna be like Pharaoh. Hey, I'm out there. No, we're gonna do this, and you're pushing me because here's the thing: you're fear driven. Because man, what if we don't make this? What if this doesn't happen? Whatever. But you're not talking about the person who's working for you, who's over there literally just verbally abusing people. You let that go because that person, they're out there helping you make money. So you kind of let that go. And then on top of that, well, do I really want to address that? I don't know if I'm really going to address that. And then you let that stuff. And again, if you go with those people, a lot of times you'll see them do it with their kids, with their wife, with other people where they don't address real issues. And so I think that's what you have to practice. Like, and again, I know we're kind of going down different things. Like, you have to practice conflict resolution, like all the time. To be honest with you, that is majority of the time being what a leader is. It's just conflict resolution. It's like literally, okay. And so like, that's what I came to realize. I'm like, this is just the job. It's to deal with conflict because why? Human beings are many times at war with each other. We are at war. We have envy. We're jealous. We at times are insecure about ourselves or whatever. And man, we spend so much time like worrying about what other people are doing. And so a lot of times as a leader, that's what you're doing. You're spending so much of your time dealing with conflict resolution.
I do want to talk about something.
Okay.
I know we've mentioned some of the church space for a little bit in this podcast, but I do think it's very unique to the church space. And for me, it's odd. I didn't grow up necessarily in a traditional church setting. And it was one of the things I noticed so quickly was how much people think that they know and have the right to know a pastor.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Like, there's almost this very odd idea where like every person within the congregation thinks that they know the pastor like to a level that they probably don't because of the nature of the content that's discussed on like in like more of a corporate setting in the church space. Whereas the corporate space is usually way far the opposite. It's kind of like, I just don't really know that person at all. And that's starting to have a little bit more pressure of integration on it, which is a good thing. But I don't know. How do you navigate maybe people's opinions of you in that sense, where it does seem to be very like targeted on your like moral, like the moral fabric of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll speak for me. I think because of the way I communicate, I very much so communicate very much so in a relational manner. Like I'm more of a storyteller.
Yeah, like when you're talking, it feels like
we're having a conversation. Yeah. And so that's why everybody's like, when people talk about it, they're like, oh, dude, I feel like you just sat down in my living room and you were with me and you're correcting the stuff and helping me as I sat down. So what can make it happen for people, they feel like they know me. And also, on top of that, I'm pretty honest. When I say this, I'm always honest, but I'm more like vulnerable, and I tell people problems, struggles, whatever. So with that, it makes people feel like there is even, more of whatever. I also think because that's been, unfortunately, a lot of the culture that was built for several years in the church organizationally was that it was like, okay, here's the pastor and they did all these things, right? I think sometimes people don't realize, I don't think some of that stuff is like, that's a style, that's a way, but that's not like biblical. There's not a biblical thing that says, okay, a pastor has to go to, I got to visit everybody's home. I've got to go to every hospital thing. I need to meet with every single person who's in there, who wants to spend time, who wants to meet with me. There's nothing that says that. The whole point is actually taking care of it. And actually, when you're healthy, you spread that out. So it's really difficult because, that's one of the hardest things. People have a lot of opinions about me. They have opinions about me of like, that I don't really, I don't really care. I've had somebody literally, and what makes it crazy is that people wouldn't do this anywhere else, but in the church space, people will say the wildest stuff because I think because they're, oh, well, he's a pastor, he's this, that they feel like they can just say whatever. Like, you wouldn't say that to any other human being out there. And sometimes I really do. I don't care. Like, I have to check people when they say something crazy like that, or they say something, especially about like my family or whatever. I'm like, oh, no. Don't let this pastor thing fool you. Like, don't do that. But honestly,
I'm not from here.
yeah, I'm like, don't do this. But the other thing is, I think that people have this perspective because, I mean, people, they've said, well, in front of people, well, I think you should be doing this with your job and you should be doing this. I'm like, really? I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were an expert, at, understanding organizational design. I didn't know you were a theological, expert because of all the years you've studied. I didn't know you were, and people just feel like they have a lot to give you an opinion on. And so it's really difficult at times, but that's the hardest thing. I will tell you, that's one of the hardest things as a pastor. And the times I wanted to quit, that's it. It's just that it becomes exhausting just dealing with people's expectations that are just false and they're selfish. That's the biggest thing. Almost anybody who's ever come to me, that's talked to me, that you can sense it from a mile away, that really do like, hey, I need some help with this. Hey, or I don't understand this. I'll tell you, I have this is incredible, couple in our church, the Wades. Like, I mentioned them by name because they should. Like, they are freaking incredible. They're in their 70s. Older white couple, super Southern. I'm this 45-year-old, black man who talks on hip-hop culture, all this stuff, reaching 18. We reach 18 to 35-year-olds. There's nothing about them. One time they had, a concern with something. But, man, when they came to talk to me, it was not in them, trying to, yo, I'm trying to prove this point and you owe me this. They were like, hey, I have a question about this. Can you help? Blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, you could just feel it. And I was like, oh no, absolutely. Da, da, da. And we started working through it, and they were very helpful because they didn't come in there to tear me down. They came in there saying, no, and it was something that was really helpful for our church, what they were seeing. And I was super thankful for it. A lot of people, when they want stuff from pastors and other people, it's literally for their own selfish gain. They think people owe them this stuff. They literally think that's the opposite of the gospel of the good news of Jesus. It is not to be served, but to serve others. And I think that's what ends up happening a lot of times, that people have false expectations on pastors and leaders. And I think it ends up being where, listen, it's one of the biggest places where people are burnt out. It's one of the greatest places since COVID that people are quitting. Is it because the expectations on people? It is insane. But on the other side of that, I'll end here, I think, but churches also have put themselves in that position because of the way they've organized themselves. Because listen, if you want to build yourself as the center of attention, right, then you're going to deal with all the attention versus spreading the power out. That's one of the best ways to do it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And to be clear, obviously we do believe that there is a moral standard if you fulfill the role of a pastor.
Absolutely.
We just believe there's 10% of that's black and white, and there's a whole lot of how that plays out. That is more of a gray.
Very clear. The Bible talks about, and again, for those listening, and you know, First Timothy will tell you this, and then you can see it in First Timothy. I think it's First Timothy 3, and First Timothy 2 or 3, and then you can see it in Titus about roles of leaders, elders, pastors, whatever. These are the moral standards and qualifications for it. And I think those things, you hold to them, you live to those things. They're very important. But then I think there's a lot of gray in organization. That's the thing. There's the difference between Bible. Mm-hmm. And then actual style and organization. Listen, they're people. People get offended by this. Well, the church is not an organization. Yes, it is. It's filled with people. You have to organize people. We have 1,000 some odd people who show up. What are we just going to be? Oh, hey, it's just random. No, it's chaos. You have to organize it. You have to have people do certain jobs, staff. That's just what it is. And I think that that's where people mix up biblical versus biblical versus cultural, or biblical versus organizational growth or organizational ways been set up. I think those things, there's so much room and freedom in that.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No. Do you got anything that you want to know?
So.
Good. Sweet. Lauren, you good?
Questions? Thoughts?
Not a question, but I'm thinking about gossip still.
Okay.
How it serves, at its core, two main purposes. One being rids you of responsibility to confront someone, which we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that I think it serves as a purpose that we didn't really talk about is that it's everybody just wants to connect with people, and it's just very cheap connection.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Easy to connect with someone over a shared like qualm or like whatever it is.
Yep.
And so when you think about like the stereotypical thought you have when you think about gossip is like a little girl is because they don't know how to do conflict yet and they're learning how to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like actually just so sad if you think about like the people who I think of as like gossipers are just really bad at relationship and like they have such cheap connection. Like that's just sad.
Yeah.
Right?
That's also
They
like
never grew out of it.
the whole purpose of Reddit. You know what I mean? Like Reddit is literally just people connecting over really cheap material.
Yeah.
It's just like really quick and easy connection that doesn't mean anything. And if you're basing your friendships off of that, like it's just such an unsteady ground to have friendship on. And that is so sad.
No,
Yeah.
that's a very good way to put it. Like
Yeah.
I never thought about it from that way, but it is very cheap connection. Because like in today's world, we don't know how we've lost the ability to, like, you think about it, like to build like relationships and friendships. Like, I mean, again, I mean, there's so many beautiful things about technology that have helped. And I think actually, if you have those skills, technology can really help people grow relationally and things like that. But like, people don't know how to like do that. So like, you don't have to talk to somebody. You know, I talk to like young men about this all the time. Like, they really don't know how to actually have conversations with like with females in a healthy way, because it's like, or not just like females, like just in general. So you're right. It's like, oh, you don't like this person, I don't like this person. Oh, okay, cool. And it's just easy versus being like, oh, I've got to actually ask you meaningful questions to get to know who you are and to be able to want to know that and to carry that. And it allows you to do that. And I think also proximity. You know, when you just connect, a lot of it, I think gossip now, it's just so much stuff online. Because I tell people, there's something about when you're around somebody. Like how, you know, I mean, you can have an opinion about somebody, and then when you get around them, like that opinion probably a lot of times changes. There's so many people I've had perspective about until I actually got around them. I'm like, oh, man, they're like really good people. Like I had this perspective about them, and I'm like, no, I'm like,
I kind of like that.
They're like really good people because again, you're on, when you just see them from a distance, it's so easy because maybe they do something that you don't like. They do something that like maybe it's not your way of doing it. So then what do we do? If it's not your way of doing it, you instantly go to all like, oh, it must be this. Do you think of the worst person, the epitome, the worst caricature of that thing they do? And then you're like, that's who they are. That's who everybody, and you're like, well, no, maybe they actually do that in a really, really like healthy way. Mm-hmm. I've been around leaders like that to where they're like, you know, I'm like, oh man, they're, you know, they have really, you know, like they're a really nice house. They have, you know, they, you know, they travel all the time. They have, you know, maybe a private plane, whatever. I instantly, you know, you go to, oh, trust fund kids, didn't really work at it. You know, somebody must have gave it to them. It was their privilege that did all that. And then when you get around them, you're like, oh, no, these people freaking work hard. They do great stuff. They give a bunch of money and all that stuff like that. And so you just get, I think proximity changes that too. But you're 100% right, Lauren. I think it's very cheap with gossip. And I think it's an easy way today. Because, I mean, you think about online, I mean, that's how you can form a community. I mean, like, people who don't have community, they form community normally, like you said, on Reddit or on Discord, wherever. They just find stuff just on like something negative. You're like, this is like, it's wild to be able to do that. So
I'm not immune to gossiping, but I don't find myself gossiping often because, not because I'm a great person, but because I have so many other tools of connection that are more valuable, that gossip is just like falling so low on the list. But if you've never taken the time to develop those tools, and most of those tools take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of intentionality.
Yes.
Like, if you don't have those tools, like, what else? You still have to connect with people. Like, that's how you're built. So, like, it makes sense, but it's just so sad.
No.
Yeah. And, like, some of it probably gets into, like, our inability to be friends with people who don't have the same values as us.
Yes. Yeah, that is a really a lost thing, is the ability to connect with people. And I will tell you, man, like, you know, there's a lot of studies that are out there right now, and people who aren't even spiritual, they have talked about, man, like the decline of like church being a really impact on society. Because the one thing about being in a church space is that some of my closest friends now, I would have never, ever, ever, ever in a million years been friends with them. but it was because we were part of a community, and man, we had like a common goal, common thing. We connected. And it was like, oh, and now I'm like, man, I can't imagine my life without them. But on a natural front, 100%, I wouldn't have done that. And I think I think that's why sports are incredibly important. I think any type of thing that you put people in where there's a mission or a common goal, you learn how to build. I think that's the other problem. People don't have they just connect now off of just whatever their thing is and whatever their preference is. And so they go that way versus connecting. That's why you see it outside all the time. You see it on a sports team. How can you have people from South Georgia, who didn't grow up around any black people, right? And somebody from Carroll City, in Miami, and they're on the same team and they become the best of friends because there's literally one mission. We're trying to win. I don't care you may have racist, that person from South Georgia could have racist freaking grandparents. You know what I'm saying? That person that's down in Carroll City, freaking parents or grandparents, they may hate white people. And at the end, they're like, I don't freaking care. We're out here on one common mission together to go after it. And you learn to value that person because there's something bigger than just yourself. And I think that's the other way connection happens. Real connection happens when there's something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
There it is. All right, guys, until next time, keep writing new rules.